Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 2 of Seraph of the End, and this series has been really surprising so far. Last episode, half the main cast died. There's vampires, there's a virus that supposedly wiped out everybody over the age of 13 that took place like 8 years ago, and now, when the episode ended, one of our main characters, was 16 technically. When the episode ended, he was 16, and it had been 8 years since humanity had supposedly been wiped out mostly by this virus, and his best friend Yu had been dead for 4 years. Mika. I don't think Mika's dead. I think Mika's a vampire. That's what I think has happened. Because, let's be real. Mika was like his best friend and one of the main characters, and it's tale as old as time. Two fated rivals that were best friends forced to fight one another. I'm here for it, but I think that's what's happened. But yeah, so I really like the characters of Yu and Mika. I don't think Mika's dead. I really like their characters. I like the idea of Yu being kind of the hot-headed protagonist, and then Mika being the more calm, rational, like intellectual, which I'm also like, vampires are usually intellectual, right? I think in stories, vampires either go one of two ways. They're either like bloodthirsty monsters, or they're really super intellectual. And I'm like, I'm veering Mika more towards that side, because I think that Mika's going to end up being, either Mika's going to be a vampire, or he's going to be working with the vampires somehow. And they somehow revived him or kept him alive somehow, even though he'd had been impaled with a hand and lost an arm. I guess we'll find out. But yeah, so all the other orphans died, supposedly. And the Farid guy is dead now. I was like, supposedly. And the pink-haired vampire from the beginning, we never saw her, so she's still around somewhere. And when we left off, Yu, supposedly because of some prophecy, Yu was rescued by these guys that look like they're vampire hunters. And at the end of the episode, it showed Yu as like a 16-year-old in the vampire hunting gear. So the question is, are we going to pick up right where that episode left off at? Or are we going to backtrack a little bit and be like, okay, within the last 4 years, because that was like 4 years later. So I'm like, okay, are we going to go back and backtrack and see what happened during those 4 years before Yu was able to? For some reason, I keep wanting to switch the names for Yu and Mika. I want to call the blonde one Yu and the dark-haired one Mika. And I know that's wrong. It should be reversed. It's interesting. My brain is telling me to switch it, and I don't know why. But yeah, so I'm pretty excited, y'all, to get into this series. It really took me by surprise. I shouldn't be surprised about the animation because it's Wit Studio, who did Empire of Corpses, who did the first 3 seasons of Attack on Titan. The animation's great. So I'm like, it looks cutesy, kind of. It sort of has that Hanako-kun vibe. If you've never watched Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, don't let the name fool you. It's actually a really good series, but it looks cutesy and kind of creepy on the outside, and then you watch it and you're like, oh, okay, this series is actually really good. This series reminds me of that. Like, the animation is kind of cutesy with them having big eyes, but they were little kids, so they're supposed to be like that. And I think as they get older, their looks are going to change a little bit. But so far, the voice cast, everything is great. The only ones we really know are Akutagawa's voice actor was the blonde one, Mika. Prince and Sugawara from IQ, his voice actor is playing Yu. And then Geto from Jujutsu Kaisen, his voice actor is playing Farid, who supposedly is dead. We'll see. It'd be kind of a shame if Farid was dead, because that'd be a waste of such a good voice actor for one episode. But it would be like, okay, this show's not messing around. If it kills people, it kills people. So, oh well. But we still have some other voice actors that we don't know yet. I've got names on this sheet, but I don't know them yet. So I'm sure as the names come out, I'll be able to point them out on here. But this episode is called Humanity After the Fall. So I guess we are going to backtrack a little bit. So I'm very curious to see what all we dive into with this episode. But with that being said, I'm pretty excited to get into this and see what all happens. So again, thank y'all for voting. We're going to jump right into episode 2 of this series and see what all goes down. So with that being said, let's start episode 2 of Seraph of the End. And we're going to start that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, this is really very sweet. A very nice, episode to be like, okay, here's all that you need to know. Here's everything you need to know. We're all good. We got OU figuring out, we're kind of going through this is still an ongoing manga, so I feel like they're streamlining through a little bit of it in this episode. They were like, it's all you need to know about Yu to get you up to speed on what's going on. But yeah, they have to remind you. So yeah, Yu is clearly clearly traumatized by losing Mika and the rest of his found family. And I like that he didn't have a last name, so they gave him Hyakuya, the name of the orphanage is now his last name, to kind of give him an identity there, right? So I feel bad for you because, yeah, that's clearly a horrifically traumatizing event to have your family that you'd known for several years just completely get obliterated by vampires within one night. Especially Mika, because him and Mika were really, really close. Like, whenever he cries out for somebody, he's calling out mainly for Mika. And the visuals of this opening scene where they're all in the shadows. And it's really interesting because they show Mika like reaching into the light, reaching into the sunlight, and then the Pharid guy like comes down onto him. But the thing of it is that the way that you envisions Mika getting attacked is not how it goes down in episode 1. No, in episode 1 he gets impaled, he gets his arm ripped off, it's very bloody and gory. It's like his mind has intentionally blocked that part out, being like, I really don't want to re-envision my best friend dying by getting like their body ripped apart and blood being everywhere. But what that calls back to, what he imagines Mika with, is back in episode 1, Mika was saying that he was basically kind of selling out his body to get more intel and to get items. So he's basically to Pharid selling himself out and getting his blood drained. So I picture that what we see of Mika getting his blood drained by Pharid is what you thought was happening to him before the actual incident that night, and now he's just replaced that memory of Mika like getting ripped apart with this memory instead. It's a much more palatable memory than that trauma from earlier. And then Mika telling him to run away, and just the visuals of him in the shadow and staying in the shadows, and then yeah, you just crying out for him, and then there we go. And so yeah, the idea that humanity didn't exactly perish. 90% perished. That's a lot. That's most of the world. Sure. But we get this opening scene with him and the other guys. And so this 4 horsemen of John, I'm so interested. So basically saying these beasts of the apocalypse, like the vampires are like a sign of the apocalypse, and 90% of humanity being completely destroyed. Interesting. And yeah, so of course, Private Hyakuya thinks that he can do this all on his own. He doesn't need anybody to help him. He's got this. And he gets mad because he killed the vampire. He killed the monster, but because he didn't work as a team, they suspended him. It's like, of course they did. Great. Yeah. And he's cocky. I mean, he's a 16-year-old kid. Of course he's cocky. And Yu was cocky back when he was like 12. So why should we imagine it be any different? So yeah, skipped the OP to get here. And so I like that so it goes back to a normal school. So I like that things have kind of picked back up where they left off at, and they're trying to re-establish a society from the ruins, right? And it makes sense why they've not rebuilt a lot, because if you think about it, at the time, this virus killed most adults, so they were just kids. And in the past 8 years, sure, kids are in their 20s or so, or whatever, or maybe the few adults that survived, they're not necessarily architects or construction workers. There's not enough people to rebuild the city. There's not enough people that were old enough to plan everything. So of course it makes sense why things are still in ruins. They don't have the workforce, the labor, or the people to sit down and map it all out. They're too worried about just surviving at this point and fighting vampires. So I kind of like that. I like that it shows there's a realistic aspect to it, that, oh yeah, we've kind of redone this schoolhouse that was still there that we just had to clean up, but the buildings that were tore down and destroyed, they haven't got a chance to rebuild those yet, because when would they have time? It's only been like 8 years and they're still trying to survive. So I like the realistic aspect of that. It's kind of cool that this whole thing is taking place in this like apocalyptic dystopian wasteland. But yeah, our poor boy Yu, he's like, oh, you'll suspend me from school. It means I get to go back into the military. And then, of course, Hiragi Shinoa. I love Hiragi. She is great. I love that she's his surveillance monitor. She seems older than she looks. She like is posing as the school kid, but she knows Gurren like they're on equal terms. So I feel like Hiragi is older than she looks. I love her design. I love the purple bow, the lavender hair, the eyes match her bow. I really like it a lot. I like her design quite a bit. And she's basically there to keep our boy Yu in check. and be like, you need to make a friend. Get a girlfriend or make a friend. One of the two. So, Hiragi... Okay, it says Hiragi's voice actor is Makoto from Free? But... What? Wait, what? But it's a girl. I'm so confused. Okay, I'm gonna reserve judgment. Maybe Shinoa has a brother. Maybe Shinoa has a brother. And, okay, maybe Shinoa has a brother and we just haven't met him yet. Because I'm like, wait, Hiragi, what is this business? What is this business? So we go back to the past when you first got away from the compound and was very confused. And we have the two people standing here. We have the girl that has the blue hair and the greenish eyes. And then there's another girl with like brownish hair. So I'm curious if we see them at the very end again. We definitely see the blue-haired girl at the very end. And then Guren. Okay. Guren's voice actor plays Kuro from Haikyuu and plays Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen. Because of course he does. As soon as we saw like his attitude in this episode, I was like, oh, you're very much like Gojo. Very similar to Gojo. Okay. Cool. Gotcha. But yeah, he reminds me a lot of you. His personality is very similar to Yu's. He's kind of cocky, but he has the maturity to kind of pull it off, right? But Shinoa kind of calls him out at the end, being like, because he's like, oh, well, Yu's in trouble because he can't be a team player, and I hate people that can't be team players. And Shinoa's like, you're the worst team player. Fitting for someone played by Gojo's voice actor. Very much so. They also make Guren look very handsome. He's a very attractive looking character. So, Trumpets of the Apocalypse. Okay, so there's these monstrous looking things. The one that we saw earlier that has like the wings and everything, and there's one that looks kind of like a praying mantis. They're very weird looking monsters. They kind of look like legendary Pokemon. So apparently these monsters have been unleashed, and I'm guessing, I don't know if the vampires eventually become those monsters, if they get to a certain level or not. I don't know if that's how it works, or if they all like merge together. I don't know what the science is at this point. But Guren's like, the human race isn't that weak, and the resurrection of mankind has already begun. Yeah, so basically, I mean, these kids probably grew up and they're, restarting civilization again. But Guren says, of course, we plan to make our organization number one. So yeah, basically, surprising no one, I'm sure different organizations of people, different cultures, different clans, different sects are rising up to try to take over. And the demon army, the Japanese Imperial Demon Army, is one of them. And they want to be the one out on top. Right. So then we're gathering the remnants of humanity in order to take control of the whole world. So it's like, we're going to fight the vampires. That's on our list of things to do. But we're also going to take over the world too. So it's a twofer, right? I like it. And then, yeah, Yu's like, who the heck are you? And I like that he takes his coat off. And he's Guren Ichinose. Okay. Lieutenant Colonel. All right. So not the main guy, but one of them. And so, yeah. And of course, he asks if he's interested in killing vampires. And of course Yu is, because he has this. And I like the subtle detail of them showing how cold his feet are. And he's like, you hate vampires, right? Yeah. Just a wee bit. So, yeah. I'm very curious to see if Shinoa has maybe a sibling that we haven't met yet. And then, yeah, so he just wants to basically be introduced into the Moon Army, which is a division of the Japanese Imperial Demon Army. He wants to get in the Moon Unit, and he wants to be on the Extermination Squad. So he wants to go out there and start killing monsters, and they're like, you're not there yet. Yeah, Yu's attitude being his biggest downfall at this point. But yeah, and then, Yoichi, Yoichi is played by Bakugo's voice actor. Why not? I find it hilarious that I'm watching Yona of the Dawn and this show, and there's two characters, a character in each show, who's voiced by Bakugo and Nishinoya's voice actor, and they're completely different. So it's like, okay. I'm here for it. Oh, old Yoichi, Yu's new friend. He's kind of like Mika, but not. I definitely like Mika more than Yoichi at this point. Yoichi is very frail appearing, but I mean, he has some resolve. He does step in and knock that vampire out of the way to try to save Yu. But I feel like Yu at some point will start to make a comparison between Mika and Yoichi. Yoichi is much more timid than Mika. I feel like Mika had a lot more prowess, had a lot more intellectual prowess and gung-ho attitude than Yoichi does. But Yoichi is a lot more innocent than I think Mika was too. So that's going to be interesting to see that comparison. Going to be very interesting indeed. So, I'm very curious to see what all we get into with this. But yeah, the moment that the vampire and everything, they establish a couple of things. One, that the vampires, they drink blood to heal themselves, right? To gain their power back. And as long as if they don't drink blood, then they're going to be powerless, right? Okay. So I'm very curious. The way that Gurren killed the vampire at the end, I was like, okay, Ferid's not dead. Because I mean, they shot him in the head, but he didn't disintegrate like the other vampires. So I'm like, no, he's still alive for sure. Definitely still alive. So I'm curious. I'm definitely curious. I was like, if they got somebody that's Ghetto's voice actor, they're not going to just use him for one episode. So I'm curious to know how exactly he stayed alive. I'm assuming he just grabbed a kid or grabbed somebody else and drank their blood to heal himself. But I definitely think that they're either keeping Mika around and healed Mika to keep him around to drink his blood, or they've turned Mika into a vampire. But I don't know the mechanics of how that works. I'm assuming we're going to find out in this series how one becomes a vampire. I'm assuming that that's going to be on the table if you like sell your soul to do it, or if there's like some biological aspect of it. I'm sure that that's the case, that we're going to find out how that's possible. But, indeed. But yeah, Ferid is definitely not dead, I don't think, at this point. And they establish that the weapon has to be a cursed weapon for it to kill actual vampires. So the gun that he has and the sword that Yu has were not going to kill a vampire. They could have like disabled them or injured them, but not going to kill them. And the sword that Gurren has, that has the black blade, like Demon Slayer, is the blade that is a cursed object, and it's able to disintegrate them. So the question is, how do objects become cursed objects? Can any object become a cursed object? Do you have to find it? Can you make an object into a cursed object? How does that work? What's the process? There's like little bits of lore and things that I'm very curious about, and I'm wanting to know how in the world, how do we get to that point? How do we curse an object to make it where it's usable? But in this episode, we established basically a lot of things. We established Shinoa Hiragi as being the surveillance officer, probably older than she looks, and is in charge of watching over our sweet, sweet boy, Yu, and making sure he doesn't make any stupid teenage mistakes. Yoichi becoming Yu's new friend. You know, not a replacement for Mika at all, mind you. Nothing like that. But definitely going to be in the squad too. I'm surprised they let Yoichi in the squad, if I'm honest. I'm surprised they let Yoichi into the squad, because Yoichi seems like he's got good resolve, but I'm not so sure that he's a good candidate to be in the extermination unit. Maybe he'll do something else. Maybe there's some like reconnaissance or something else Yoichi can do that doesn't involve him like on the front lines, if that makes sense. And we have our 4 characters in addition to Hiragi, Shinoa. We have the blue-haired girl. She's in the background there. And then the other girl that had the like dirty blonde, strawberry blonde hair is back there. Then we have a girl with long red hair that's in the unit, right? That has like the pantsuit. And then we have a guy with blonde hair. And I'm wondering if the guy with blonde hair, I wonder if he is voice acted by Makoto. Or maybe it is Hiragi. Maybe Hiragi's voice actor's a man. I'm fine with it. I'm totally fine with it. It's just very odd. I hadn't expected that. So I'll be curious to see if this blonde guy is maybe Hiragi's brother, or if Hiragi is actually voiced by Makoto, or if it's not a different one. I guess we'll find out. But yeah, I'm curious to see these 4 other members of the demon army and what they do, like what their skills are, if they have a particular skill. Because like the girl with the brown hair, the brownish strawberry blonde hair, has a notebook, and the others look like they may have weapons with them too. So, and their outfits are all very different. And they're all in the green, and Gurren is in the red, signifying that Gurren's a lieutenant colonel or a higher ranked position. The Moon Demon Company. Yeah. And I like that Yu's still like, I'm not interested in making friends, but Shinoa's like, you still made one whether you wanted to or not. So yeah, I'm curious to get backstory into the demon army and how this all works. But yeah, poor Yoichi, like crash landing into him, causing a concussion. And then he has the dream, and Mika and all of them are happy that he made a friend. And so they feel like they can rest in peace now that he has a friend. So, interesting. But yeah, and then we get that shot of the city just in ruins. And they all put their hands together like, let's go Ducks. And then I love that Yu's like, this is stupid. But he does it anyway. So yeah, that was a very, very clean cut episode to be like, to give us just a little bits and pieces of exposition, to kind of explain what's going on, but also establish that Yu's attitude, why he's not immediately been like in the extermination unit, that he's had to kind of work for it, to establish Hiragi, to establish Yoichi, to give us some establishment on Gurren, to explain how the cursed objects work, even though we don't know the mechanics of it, to know that it takes a cursed object to kill a vampire, to know how the vampire healing properties work. They need the blood to do it. It's all like just little crumbs of world building. The fact that 90% of the population's gone and we're having to rebuild from scratch. Little things like that, just building up the lore in this series that is really, really interesting. So, yeah. Yeah, this is a pretty good episode. Good second episode, getting the establishment there of these characters. I don't get good vibes from Yoichi being in the Moon Demon Army, but maybe they'll give him a job where he can use his skills, right? Because Yoichi is pretty brave. He did go after and try to help in that situation, even when he knew he probably didn't have the skill to actually kill a vampire. So, very curious. There's another character on here that's played by a different character, but we haven't come in contact with him yet. So, But yeah, so still not watching the OP or ED. I'm going to go through episodes 3 and 4 before. I've been told after episode 4 I can watch the OP and ED. So, yay for that. But I'm very curious to know your comments down below about this episode. It was a pretty clean-cut, straightforward episode. It didn't feel rushed in any sense, but I feel like we've solved the friend problem and now we're ready to move on. So I'm curious where we go to from here. And I want to see more world building with this world and see more about like where do people live at? Do they live in apartments? Are they just all scattered out throughout the place? Does the Imperial Demon Army have like their own base? Do they have their own housing for members? How does that work? And so there's like little nuances and logistics that I want to know more about. But I feel like we're going to find that out in the next episode or the episode after that. So, and I want to know what happened. I feel like they're not going to reveal what really happened to Mika and Ferid until later on in the series. They're not going to reveal that yet. So I'm like, but yeah, I want to know more about these apocalyptic beasts, like the 4 horsemen. Like, how does that work? I want to know about those creatures. How do they come from vampires? Are they from vampires? Are they something different? I have lots of questions, basically. So don't spoil me. I'm going to figure it out. But in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Thank y'all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed this reaction. But yeah, I'm pretty excited. So next time we'll watch episode 3. And in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back real soon with episode 3 of Seraph of the End. Bye.